Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And seeing as I've already been offered questions to be asked, I guess I'll start in without asking if I might.
Okay.
As chair of Ways and Means and now seeing the first of the budget bills, I guess a lot of people in the chamber today, certainly on my side of the aisle and perhaps on yours as well, are, in addition to looking for what we're talking about in debt today in this bill, of just looking at where we are. The clock is ticking toward April 1st, and I know conference committees have met, but in your perspective, where we stand today to get us to the finish line in a timely fashion, what is your perspective of where we stand today?
As you know, that traditionally we act on the debt service bill to make sure the bond raters and everybody know that the state is going to be secure in advance of the final passage of the bill. But I believe that we are on track for an on-time budget, which this year really means an early budget since it's because of the various religious holidays. I'm optimistic that by this time, well, actually, by the just over a week from now, that we'll be standing here debating the final budget.
I hope that the chair is correct, and thank you, Helene, for that perspective. As you went through some of the summary we did in Ways and Means, and just looking at where the dollar figures are, telling us that we're within the caps that are been placed on by the total amount of debt, what the debt service is, how much we're appropriating in this bill, and how much those debt payments will be. And one of the things you brought up that actually sounded good to me was you said that we are going to be actually anticipating about $675 million or so less than the current fiscal year in actually debt service payments. But I guess what I would like to say in that, though, in the 5-year plan that we have, the state would, what the governor is showing, or in the executive's financial plan, would show that we're going to add, or authorize over those next 5 years like $33 billion, and that would total $10.7 billion more than what's projected. So it kind of sounded to me like, gee, maybe we're making progress. We're going to be paying less in debt service. But now I look at it and saying, going forward, we're looking to probably expand significantly the total amount of debt that we're going to have, raising up to $65.9 billion over the next 5 years. And I guess, my question would end up being is, do you see that as being sustainable? Can we, in the midst of, what the payments are today, how much we owe today, $52 billion, we're authorizing to get up to 55, but then in 5 years, several billions more on top of that. Are we going to be able to continue to fit within the caps and meet our obligations to the state?
Yes, we believe so, and obviously there's a difference between the cap on the bonds themselves versus the interest payments, the debt payments. So as we've added additional capital, we've added additional capital for things like hospitals and SUNY, CUNY, as we've added more of that capital, that the debt service those payments are starting to come due, and they will, over time, as you say, will be on an increase, but I think we're confident that we'll be able to make the debt service payments.
When we went through and you gave some of the figures, both in Ways and Means and in your opening comments today, is your expectation that by any of the actions we're going to take over the next week or so and authorizations of things as we look forward in the debt, are we going to be impacting any of those figures as we look toward the future and the financial plan that the governor put out with his budget proposal?
I think we're confident that there is enough room in the appropriation, in the dry appropriation that's there, to be able to sustain additional debt. And if we need to, obviously, we can come back. If you remember the discussion we had in the White House, we're hoping there still will be some reserves if necessary to make an adjustment.
Well, one of the things the governor talked about in this financial plan as well was assuming some capital efficiencies and capital spending reductions to stay within the debt cap. Do we have any specifics on what these efficiencies or reductions are? At the same time, we're raising the amount of capital investment?
Well, I think at this moment I couldn't give you the specifics. I know that they are looking at different mechanisms to try and manage the debt, whether it's stretching it out or looking into other kinds of efficiencies. I think that's where we are at the moment.
Well, one of the things I know under the federal tax reform, the advanced refundings are no longer tax exempt, and so the state utilizes those as a way to lower the debt and manage it. Has this issue come up yet in negotiations, and is there anything that the state plans to do specifically with that to keep the financial plan needs met?
There isn't really discussion going on now. I think when, last year when the federal plan was enacted, there was estimations that I guess nationwide it would be about a 20% impact, about 20% of the bonds, municipal bonds that get refinanced. In anticipation of that happening, and actually after it being enacted, the state did do some refinancing of our debt. But as you know, at the moment, interest rates are relatively low, so the refinancing generally would be to take advantage of a lower rate. So for the moment, it's not an issue on many of our, in the current situation. It may, as time goes on, that federal change may in fact impact New York State as well as other states.
One of the things we talked about last week with the One House was the governor's proposal that was rejected in the Assembly One House, as well as, it's my understanding, the Senate One House, that would direct the director of the budget to take 50% of whatever is the cash surplus at the end of the fiscal year, to move that to the debt reduction reserve fund. So that was rejected by both of the houses in their One House proposals. Have we come to any final resolution on that issue, whether or not that will end up in the final budget or no?
It's not been resolved yet. It's still under negotiation, so probably a week from now I could give you a much better definitive answer.
I may ask that question again, or be able to find it out myself. And the debt service costs and how we apply that, the bond markets look at us and rate us on our ability to pay. We put the PIT against that, but there, with the changes in Washington with the tax law, with some of the proposed changes, the payroll tax system and others, has there been any agreement to an increase in the percentage of receipts that the PIT would be applied to keep our bond rating strong as we go forward? Or has there been any other discussion about what we're going to do if we incorporate the payroll tax system?
Well, there's no final agreement on that, but yes, there is, and we'll discuss that when we talk about the revenue, next week, hopefully. There is a proposal that if we do enact the payroll tax, enact payroll tax as a way for people to make a contribution and to try and deal with some of the impact of the changes in tax law of Washington, particularly for the PIT bonds, which have a AAA rating because of the backing of our personal income tax, to increase the percentage. Right now it's 25% of the PIT, of our PIT, the personal income taxes are dedicated to these bonds to back up the security for these bonds. So there is a proposal to increase. The governor does have a proposal to increase that percentage, and also to have a percentage from the funding that would come in from a payroll system if we were to adopt that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your answers on the bill, Mr. Speaker.
On the bill, Mr. Oaks.
Today we've see the first bill of the stack of budget bills that will hopefully appear on our desks in the coming days. And this is the bill that says to the state and to our bondholders, et cetera, that the state will meet its obligation of debt that we have incurred over the years, and that we will follow through with that. I myself plan to vote for this because I think we need to meet those obligations, but in talking with the chair and receiving some of the answers as we look forward, I would also hesitate, all of us in this chamber, majority, minority members alike, and the other house and the executive, that as we go forward, there are things that can impact our ability to pay. The strength of the personal income tax in New York State, and very honestly, the governor has downgraded some of that as we look forward on the dollars coming in. That is yet to be determined. We have dwindling settlement dollars that have been applied toward some of the debt in the past. We have interest rates that are rising to what level we don't know, but the debt service on growing debt is of grave concern to me in our state and our ability to pay annually the dollars that we have. Thank goodness we created back nearly 20 years ago some debt reform in this state, but within that we still have a great impact on our annual budget of money going to debt service out of the dollars coming in from the taxpayers of New York, being focused on and having to be focused on clearly debt that we've incurred, much of it, in fact over 90%, 90+% of that never approved by the voters of New York State. So as we go forward, my concern today would be to raise to each one of us what we take action in this next budget as we put that out. Again, today we're approving the payments for debt we've already incurred, not to and hold back and try to do all we can to hold down the debt and the growth of debt in the state as we go forward. Thank you.